لكن الاحتلال المجرم اصطدم بصلابة شعبنا وتشبثه بأرضه، ففشل في تحقيق أي من أهدافه السرية أو المعلنة.
The man you just heard speaking, Khalil al-Hayya, Hamas chief in Gaza. He made those comments last night in Doha, Qatar, after Hamas had signed off on the hostage deal. And what he said was October 7th was the beginning, and Hamas will continue the struggle until all occupied lands, meaning Israel, are liberated. This morning at 10:30, the Prime Minister's office in Israel issued a statement stating in part, Hamas is retracting explicit understandings that were agreed upon with the mediators and Israel in a last-minute attempt at extortion. As I record this at 3 p.m., the agreement has not gone to cabinet for approval. Bezalel Smotrich, leader of the Religious Zionist Party, is meeting with his party members, and they are discussing whether or not to approve the deal and whether or not to remain in the coalition. We wait on tenterhooks. We don't know what the day will bring. And now, to my discussion earlier today with the amazing Jonathan Conricus, senior fellow at FDD, former IDF spokesperson, and good friend of State of Tel Aviv. We discuss the deal. Warts, positives, everything in between. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Stay with us. Good morning, Jonathan Conricus. Thank you so much for squeezing in State of Tel Aviv on what I know is going to be a very busy day for you. So let's just do it. We seem to have a deal signed to return hostages in stages. And there's a lot of discussion, as we both know, and we're both involved in. So let's have your thoughts on that. Good deal? Bad deal? Should we have done it? Should we not have done it?
Yeah, good morning, Vivian. It's bitter. More on towards bitter than bittersweet in my mind. Yes, I am happy and will be, I think, overwhelmed with joy to see, when I see it, some of the Israeli hostages returned to the loving embrace of their families. But it is only some of the hostages. Each one is a olam umloo, a world in of its own, and tremendously important for each and every family. But if we zoom out and take stock of the picture, my issues with this deal are the following. One is that it's only part of the hostages, 33, and not all of them. It, I think, casts a long, hard, difficult shadow over the rest, the majority of the hostages that, per this ceasefire deal, will remain in Hamas captivity. The men and the soldiers, the male soldiers, that is very, very difficult for me to stomach. Second thing, strategically speaking, most important, Israel is short of achieving its strategic goals. We have not defeated Hamas militarily, and we have not dismantled their control over Gaza, and we are not returning all of the hostages. So none of the three goals defined by the State of Israel, by the cabinet 15 months ago, are achieved. They're partially achieved, but none of them are achieved. So that's not good. Third thing is that this can, and I am 100% sure that it will be interpreted by our enemies as a victory. Why? Because they're still there to crawl out of their tunnels in which they've been hiding during the fighting, leaving the civilians in Gaza above ground to suffer and to be used as their human shields. Hamas, as the cowards they are, will now crawl out of their tunnels and claim victory. And the fact that Gaza is in ruins and that it has no future for the next generation will not spoil their celebration. And they will claim that they were able to apply their resistance and the sumud, which is their ability, their steadfastness, which is a main part of Hamas and Palestinian propaganda. And that is very regrettable because victories to terrorists beget violence and more terror. Fourth thing is the release of terrorists with lots of Israeli blood on their hands, terrorists that have murdered Israelis and should either have been executed if we had laws that permitted that, or at least rot in jail until their last day. Unfortunately, they are now going to see the light of day, and they're going to be welcomed back to Palestinian society as heroes. That will be very difficult to stomach as well. The person who signed this deal on behalf of Israel is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This is his deal. The fifth thing that I am not happy with is the redeployment of Israeli troops outside of Gaza, and the fact that at the end of the ceasefire, as per this agreement and as according to the details that we have now, Israel will withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor, the border with Egypt, and from the Netzarim corridor in the middle of the Gaza Strip. Israel will have the so-called security buffer zone, or referred to in Israel as the perimeter, which is about a kilometer deep strip along the border for added security and better defense, but that will be it. And when we take all of these components into consideration, I am bewildered. And I am careful in what I say because we do not still have any official acknowledgement by Prime Minister Netanyahu. He is the person, the leader, who has signed and agreed to this deal. And I think families and the Israeli population, the people of Israel, are waiting for him to explain what this deal really is. Based on what I've read, the Arabic details, or the document in Arabic that was circulated by Qatar and Egypt, that's what I base my understanding on now. This is not a good deal. But I keep reminding myself that Netanyahu is a very shrewd politician, and that it defies logic that he would sign such a bad deal, I think, for Israel and for him politically, even though I understand very little about politics. So there is, at this stage, many bad things to worry about, and a few good things that might be in the future. 33, hopefully, Israeli hostages returned. But at this stage, a day after Arabs and Americans have announced the deal, but Israel still hasn't, I am worried, concerned, disappointed, and not hopeful for the future. And I know that this will only be a milestone in the road, and that sooner than later we will go back to fighting Hamas and whatever other abominations from the Gaza Strip, because this isn't the end of the war.
No, it's not. It's, as I tend to say, it's not a one-act play. So let me offer just a brief, kind of devil's advocate, contrarian position to what you've laid out, because I think that I can, and all of us can agree that it's not a good deal, but it's a deal. And from my perspective, we lost on October 7th. We lost when we didn't react as a country, and our army was asleep for 12 hours or more. They didn't show up to the kibbutzim until late in the afternoon on October 7th. As soon as Hamas basically swanned into Israel, did what it did, and then took 250 human hostages, we'd lost the war. We can't fight it on our terms. We took a long time to go back in. We were kind of like, pedal on the gas and stop, pedal on the gas and stop. I mean, there are legitimate criticisms with respect to what Israel has done and how it has prosecuted the war. And so fast forward to today, we have however many hostages are clinging to life. And if they're not out soon, they're all going to be dead. We have a national ethos that commits us to leaving no one behind. And you're saying, well, we should soldier on, no bad pun intended, soldier on, finish the job, achieve our strategic goals. And I'm going to suggest that they may not have been very, very carefully thought through when they were first announced and uttered. And they have modified. Destroy Hamas so that they don't exist and can't reconstitute. Maybe that wasn't realistic this round. There will be another round. But maybe that wasn't realistic. As you know, I live very close to Gaza now, and I hear the helicopters going overhead before we hear on the evening news that 5 soldiers died. And we both know that in the last 2 weeks, the ambushes, the intensity of battle in the northern Gaza Strip has really spiked, and we're losing a lot of soldiers. We don't have those numbers to lose and sacrifice. And if we had things to a place where they were quite calm a few weeks ago, and the government was saying, look at us, we've done it, Hamas is done. And then all of a sudden it surges again. That says to me a few things. It says to me, we're not doing something right. We shouldn't be losing this many soldiers at this stage. It also says to me, we are a very tired country. We are tired in our marrow. We need a good night's sleep. This country hasn't slept for 15 months. And I think that it's not defeatist and it's not capitulating to say, let's take a pause. If we don't get these people out now, we're never going to get them out. Let's do it in stages. Yeah, let's fully withdraw. And then if we have to, and we will go back in and we will do the job on our terms, not on October 8th terms.
Yeah, I mean, you have a point, and that's what, we can be hopeful about the future. And the optimist in me forces me to say, well, if Netanyahu agreed to this deal, then there must be a catch, because at face value, it's a lousy deal. However you turn and look at it, it's lousy and bad for the future, unless there are behind the scenes promises and agreements between President Trump and Netanyahu about Gaza and about Iran and about Saudi. But even if, let's say, theoretically speaking, that there are assurances from President Trump to Israel that he will make normalization happen between Israel and Saudi. He will bring the Saudis to recognize Israel and significantly expand the Abraham Accords. In my mind, that is still a bad deal. Because we are short of our achievements and we have fought 15 months of it now for it. Now, about fighting, something that I think should be said here. I don't think that the goals that were determined by the Israeli cabinet in the beginning of the war are unrealistic or incorrect. I think that they are what Israel should aspire to do. I don't see a future in Gaza or in southern Israel without Israel achieving those goals. I don't see security and I don't see prosperity. I don't see a positive future without Israel doing that. So I think the goals are correct. My issue is with how we have been conducting the fighting. And yes, exactly as you said, like a novice driver, not entirely sure if he's putting the foot on the pedal and then stopping in a rocking motion, instead of building momentum and crushing the enemy. But to be frank here, I think we have had serious issues with the ability to use all layers of power and all levers of power and influence over Hamas. The fact that today Hamas is still in power is much thanks to the fact that Israel has been forced to allow humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip unconditionally, aid that is the lifeline to Hamas. And I am not for starving a civilian population, but I am for winning a war, and you win war by inflicting pain and suffering on your enemy until your enemy cries out, I can't take it anymore, I give up. And we have not achieved that.
Except that when you're dealing with a suicidal death cult that really doesn't give a toss about the well-being of its people, which is what we have with Hamas next door, I query whether withholding humanitarian aid would actually make a difference to them as long as they, the Hamas fighters, have what they need. But let's park that. We're looking at them and we're imposing our moral matrix. It's not theirs.
They're void of morals.
Exactly.
They
They
have
don't
a
care
totally
about
different operating system. Totally.
they don't care. They don't care about the civilian
No,
well-being.
no, I agree. They don't. The civilians are expendable. The civilians
Yep.
are a tool. They're a recruiting base. They're cannon fodder, and they are expendable. They are not of worth, and Hamas doesn't see them as their responsibility. They've said so many times they're the responsibility of the UN to care for, while Hamas focuses all of their resources on fighting against Israel, building tunnels, hiding underground, and firing rockets and abducting Israelis. That's clear. But in this real, Machiavellian world of politics, you bring pain. You bring pain by inflicting damage on your enemy, and you use all the tools available. And for 15 months, we have not done that. Now, hopefully, once this deal is over, or if it is breached by Hamas by not returning hostages or other things, then perhaps the agreement between the US and Israel, or the assurances and understanding, is that Israel will not only be able to go back to fighting, but that the fighting will be different. That is the hope that I cling on to, and hope that this is part of the fine print of the agreement. Otherwise, it's a sad day for Israel.
I'm choosing to, number one, read a lot into Waltz's comments. Those were not idle comments. I think they were very, very poignant, profound, and they were released yesterday for a reason. It's politics, as you say. Number two is, I think that there is no shame in looking at a situation and saying, we need to pause and catch our breath. We're making dumb decisions. And saying, we have a very fatigued country. You stop, you regroup, you take some gains that are gains for our side, you get all of them out, every last one, and then you go in, again, on our terms, without them holding 250 civilians and torturing them, which is like fighting with two hands behind your back, this crazy coalition we have, to which Bibi has been beholden and will be beholden. And we have a very different kind of political landscape now. We have Trump, who is going to not renew all UNRWA funding. He's going to destroy UNRWA and the WHO.
I hope he does.
We have, of all countries, Sweden and the Netherlands have pulled funding. We have
And Switzerland.
And Switzerland. We have an election coming in Canada later this year. They will pull funding. The U.S. is $360 million alone. Canada, Justin Trudeau says, is over 100. I'm willing to bet you that it's double that. It's a lot of money they're losing. That's going to bring them to the ground unless the Qataris step up. So let's just assume that in the coming year, we're going to be dealing with a very different chessboard, okay? And we take this hit to get these poor hostages out and to restore the national confidence in the ethos, which I happen to believe is terribly important.
Yes, but this deal doesn't do that, Vivian. This deal brings back, at best, 33 of the hostages.
Yes.
Not all of them.
For now, no. But if at day 16, they negotiate the next stage, and then with the full withdrawal from Gaza, by the end of month 3, we get all of the hostages. That's the deal. Okay, so stage 1 includes negotiations from day 16. If they stop negotiating, or if they don't negotiate and come to the table day 16, it's over. But it's not about leaving anyone behind, in my view, in the fine print. Now, before I let you go, I have to ask you this because it's driving me crazy, which means it's driving a lot of people crazy. Why do we always accept these insane ratios? Forget that we're prepared to release like these vicious mass murderers. But why 50 to 1? And we don't even know if the one is alive or on the brink of death. And they get 50 well-fed maniac terrorists. Help me understand why we constantly submit to that absurd ratio.
That's a great question, Vivian. And I think it's market price and inertia and the established going rate. If this was a one-off, this deal and the ratio of 1 to 50, 50 terrorists for one Israeli female soldier, if this was the first time we agreed to that, then we could speak about very poor negotiating skills and other things. But as you say, this has been how Israel has negotiated, well, since the Shalit deal and in between. Common denominator here is it's the same prime minister, which is extremely regrettable. But the Shalit deal, more than 1,000 terrorists, including Yahya Sinwar and many heavy and politically important terrorists with lots of blood on their hands, were released then, and that was the beginning of October 7 already then. And it appears that we will be releasing hundreds, if not more than hundreds, of terrorists in order to get 33 hostages back. And we've already released hundreds of terrorists in the first hostage release deal. So I think it's the established norm. It is extremely regrettable. It does make you wonder. It does make you wonder why we agree to it time after time, and how our enemies, well, most of the time it's Hamas, but Hezbollah similarly, are able to force those conditions upon us. Don't really have a good answer on why that is. I can just reiterate how poor of a practice it is. And, when we look ahead, and this is perhaps the most somber thing of all, those kind of ratios and this kind of outcome in a ceasefire and hostage deal, what they ensure is that terrorists will try to abduct Israelis again, because they see that it works. They see that it's a strategic leverage over Israel. They see that it's a way of getting Palestinian terrorists out of Israeli prisons, and that it works and delivers. And that is another bad component of this deal.
Well, I know that we both, and believe that every Israeli wants a good outcome, which is the destruction total of Hamas' inability to reconstitute in the Gaza Strip or anywhere, and just to allow us to live in peace and security. We're not there yet. As I said at the outset, it's not a one-act play. And I think that perhaps we've set unreasonable goals for ourselves that were not achievable in the first round. So I think we all want the same thing. Let's hope we get there. Let's hope we get out as many hostages as are alive today over the next 3 months, and then maybe even have a state commission of inquiry or something.
That would be good. And that's, by the way, one important thing, because now there's really no excuse for the prime minister or the government to be saying, well, we're in a war. Now there's a ceasefire, and there's definitely time for the IDF to present its investigations and conclusions and findings, and for politicians to be investigated by a state board of inquiry.
And it would also be very helpful with respect to the outstanding legal cases that are now before the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. So even Prime Minister Netanyahu could see these as being in his own personal interest, which seems to always be a critical factor in any decision. And we need it as a country. And I think that perhaps the U.S. will put some pressure on this government to do that, because Netanyahu has indicated repeatedly he won't. It matters. We need it. It's important. We need to flush out the system. As a very good friend of mine, 7th generation Israeli, Mizrahi, former Likud supporter, said, 3 boys in the army. As he said at the outset, I want to know how deep and wide the rot is.
Oh, the rot is extremely deep and very wide. And I share the sentiment. We need a reset of the Israeli political system. We need a reset in the military. All those accountable, responsible for the failures of October the 7th in the military and in the elected echelon, anybody that had any influence on Israel's policy towards Egypt and Gaza, and to a certain extent Judea and Samaria, but specifically Egypt and Gaza, and anybody who served in a senior position, Southern Front, Gaza Division, IDF Intel, and I would assume also a few at the Israeli Air Force and operations. The rot is deep, and it needs to be amended, and nothing cleanses better than sunlight.
So, amen to that. Thank you for your time today, especially because I know it's a very, very precious commodity in short supply, and really appreciate you sharing your always valuable insights with us. Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Have a good day.
Thank you, Vivian.
Thanks again for being here. We are committed to keeping you updated throughout the day, tomorrow, and every day after we are on this story. Stay tuned. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to hello@stateoftelaviv.com. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Jan Szabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager, who pitches in on everything, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team. Thanks to you for being here. We'll be back soon.